What's up, y'all? It's Dr. Paul with Liberty Hill Comics, where I share my passion and over 40 years of experience comic book collecting, investing, and conservation with you. Today, we're continuing the conservation project for this copy of Flash number 123, the first appearance of the Golden Age Flash Jay Garrick in the Silver Age, and the first acknowledgement of an alternate reality in which the Golden Age heroes exist, which is the beginning of the multiverse concept in comic books. Published in September 1961 by DC, it was written by Gardner Fox and drawn by Carmine Infantino. It is also the first appearance in the Silver Age of Golden Age Flash villains, the Fiddler, the Thinker, and the Shade. This is a huge Silver Age key without which the multiverse concept in both DC and Marvel Comics wouldn't exist. In Episode 1, we completed a thorough assessment of this book and developed a conservation game plan. The cover had a small hole in it, but the major flaw we uncovered is that it appears someone spilled a can of Coke on the interior of this comic book, and wraps 1, 6, 7, and 8 were affected fairly dramatically. Wrap 8 is the centerfold, which appeared to be ground zero for the spill, and also has a spine split we need to address. Here is our conservation plan for the book, including disassembly, wet cleaning, deacidification, resizing for the cover, stain removal for the inner wraps, tear seals, cold press, reassembly, folding, and final press. In Episode 2, we disassembled the book to prepare for the coming work, setting aside the staples for use during reassembly later, carefully noting both the position and the orientation of each staple, and safely storing the interior pages away in Mylar whilst we work on the cover. In Episode 3, we completed work on the cover. We performed a total of 3 aqueous baths, each for 5 minutes. The first had a primary function of wet cleaning and contained a surfactant as well as calcium hydroxide in warm water. The second bath's primary function was to rinse away residual contaminants and the surfactant and consisted of calcium hydroxide in warm water. The last bath had a primary function of resizing the cover and contained methyl cellulose as a resizing agent, along with calcium hydroxide to leave an alkaline reserve in the comic book to protect against future acid-catalyzed hydrolysis of the paper. The rationale, formulae, calculations, and methods for all of these processes are explained in detail in my video on Advanced Comic Book Cleaning, Deacidification, and Resizing Methods, which you can view by following the link to that video if you're interested. After all of the wet work was done, we completed an archival tear seal and began our drying and cold press process. The results were phenomenal, a cover which was dramatically brightened without substantial loss of ink, and the tear seal strengthened the page and was essentially invisible. The resizing will strengthen the paper and make it water resistant, and we used no harsh chemicals that would provide aesthetically pleasing short-term results, but long-term damage to the paper. In Episode 4, we started treating the stains on the interior wraps. Our approach was to start with the least invasive method on the wrap with the most severe staining, which was the centerfold, and regularly check our progress and step up to more invasive methods as necessary. Then, once we achieve the best result our knowledge and skills will afford us on the centerfold, we'll apply that method to the remaining pages so that we don't have a difference in paper quality or any remaining stains from wrap to wrap on the interior of the comic book. Our first step was a 500 milliliter wash consisting of 20% saturated calcium hydroxide in warm water with 5 drops of Triton X100 for 20 minutes. Triton X100 is a surfactant, and the primary goal of this first aqueous bath is washing or cleaning the paper. We followed this with a 300 milliliter bath of 33% saturated calcium hydroxide solution in tap water, but with concurrent exposure to our 465 nanometer wavelength blue LEDs at 4 inches for 1 hour. After this procedure, we dried the page and cold pressed it to have a look at the progress so far on the stains. We made considerable progress on the stains and retained good ink and paper integrity, but I felt we could do better. In particular, the first wash was very dirty, and upon reflection, I didn't like the page sitting in the really dirty wash for 20 minutes. So, we have both more work to do on the wrap and ideas for tweaks to the method for the next wrap. In episode 5, we continued work on the centerfold with concurrent photo and chemical bleaching. We use only 0.5% hydrogen peroxide with 25% saturated calcium hydroxide concurrent with our 465 nanometer blue LEDs for photo bleaching. We reviewed the literature to explain why it's contraindicated to use hydrogen peroxide at concentrations higher than 0.5% for paper conservation, and why we never use chloramine T for bleaching in conservation. Total bleaching time was 2 hours, with the bleaching solution replaced every 30 minutes throughout. We reviewed the results and decided we had taken this page as far as we wanted to. Under normal viewing light, the stains are no longer noticeable, although under very intense LED lighting, the barest hint of shading remained where the darkest stains were. In episode 6, I presented a streamlined cleaning, deacidification, and bleaching process for the interior wraps with infographics to clearly communicate the materials and methods that I use for the rest of the interior wraps. I was much pleased with the results from the small modifications we made to the process. It was more efficient, and I think the rinsates demonstrated the benefits of multiple shorter wash sessions. As with our previous stain removal method, nearly complete stain removal was achieved while brightening up the page without noticeably affecting the ink vibrancy or paper stability. The pages looked great, as you can see from these side-by-side before and after images. In episode 7, I pulled the individual wraps from the cold press in my Seal Masterpiece 350, reassembled them in order, and replaced the staples. If you want to watch any of those episodes before watching this one, just click on the playlist I've created for this project. Today, I'm going to put the fold back in this book. We'll put it in the final press, and I'll show you the final results. Alright, let's get to work putting a fold back in this book. So I did something a little different this time. I left it in the humidity chamber for a full 24 hours. So I'm using a Silver Age size backer board here, and this is how I make the marks for the cutouts for the staples. Notice I'm using a pencil here. If I goof, I can erase it off the paper. I wouldn't want to use a pen. And I just cut a little crescent shape out of this backer board. You want to use a Silver Age backer board because essentially it's going to be almost the same width as the pages of the book here, since this is a Silver Age book. And that means I can pinch them all together and I can see the pages from the top of the book, the bottom of the book. Make sure you capture these little guys. You wouldn't want to leave those in for your press. Now I use my fingernail and I kind of burnish these edges because the scissors that I use sort of twist the backer board, and I don't want any sharp edges that are going to create like a crease in the book when I press it. Although in this case I'm not going to use this backer board for the press. I'm only going to use this backer board to put the fold back in the book. So as I was mentioning, I ordinarily would only humidify the book for say like 2 hours in my humidity chamber at 98% relative humidity. Here I have my hanger heated tack iron. I set to about 2.5. I'm going to let that warm up while I prep my other materials. This is a slab of granite that I repurposed from a kitchen remodel, and I just cut it to the size that I needed. This is just about a 1/2 inch taller and wider than the largest Golden Age comic books when they're open. I'm going to have 2 pieces of silicone release paper, SRP, and my book. As I was saying, I ordinarily would humidify the book for about 2 hours in 98% relative humidity. I left it overnight, so a full 24 hours in the humidity chamber. And I think it made a difference. I think it improved my ability to put the fold in. So the paper's very floppy. You can see it folded. It conformed to this backer board almost immediately. If you have watched the channel for a while, you know that in the past when I've done this with only an hour or 2 in the humidity chamber, that it doesn't fold quite as readily around the backer board, and it's a little bit more work to put the fold in. So this paper, being fully saturated, just wrapped right around that backer board, and the fold was almost already there. All we had to do is put a little bit of heat into it to really make sure that that fold's set. So this is a little bit different, a little bit quicker than what you've seen me do before, and I think it gave us a better result. It was much easier to put essentially a perfect fold in this book. So I'm going to plan to do this in the future. Just leave the book in the humidity chamber a bit longer prior to putting the fold back in the book. I'm going to flip it over one more time just to really make sure that this fold is set and is going to stay in the book. I think that SRP is curling a bit more than normal, probably because this heating iron is driving humidity out of the page. And that humidity obviously is then going into whatever materials around it, including the SRP, which is causing the SRP to curl more than it normally would. One last time, but essentially at this point I'm already satisfied that this fold is spot on and it's going to take. So some of what I'm doing now is really just already pressing the book. Done with my tack iron. Set it aside. Last time I did this, you saw me leave this backer board in the book and go ahead and press it with this in this case, a Silver Age backer board. I'm not going to do that this time because this backer board doesn't quite line up all the way around outside of the paper of the book. And I certainly don't want to put a ridge in the paper because the backer board was smaller than what I needed. So I prepped a magazine-sized backer board off camera because it's essentially the same process you just watched me do. I didn't think you'd need to see that again. I'm going to swap it out for the Silver Age backer board that was in the book during the refold. Again, these recesses provide a space for the staples to sit in, the arms of the staples that are curled up. If you don't have a backer board in the centerfold of the book, you can press the paper into those staple arms and get indentations. Underneath the cover, I'm going to put one sheet of 60-pound cardstock. I'm going to do the same underneath the rear cover. You want it to be all the way over to the edge, but not too tight. You push it in too far, you can get sunken staples. So you see me push it in and push it back a few times until I have it right where I want it. Then I'm going to hold the book tightly and transfer it to my smaller seal press. This is the Masterpiece 350's baby brother. The sandwich here is 2 magazine backer boards and a sheet of SRP below and the same above. I'm going to put it in here for about 155 degrees for approximately 15 minutes. Then I'm going to let it cool. I'm retrieving it now the following day. You don't have to let it cool a full 24 hours in the press, but I'm a hobbyist. My press doesn't need to run a dozen books a day, so I can do that. If you need to take it out sooner because you need to turn your press over for other uses, you want to take the book and put it in a cold press after it cools down for probably 24 hours. And that's just to make reversion of any crinkles that you took out likely from coming back. I'll remove my buffer and just admire this beautiful book. I really couldn't be more pleased with the final outcome of this conservation of this Silver Age comic book. Remember, going into this project we had several unknowns. First, the previous comic book we did a wash, deacidification, and resizing on suffered some color loss on the cover, which you can check out by following the link to that series here. And I was anxious to modify my method and run it back on this book. I'm happy to say that turned out very well, although I'll probably continue to play with the materials and methods for resizing. Secondly, it was not a given that we would be able to so thoroughly address the significant staining in this book without completely washing the inks out too. These wraps here were some of the worst stained, and really under this normal light, it's completely unnoticeable now. You can see the page is white, and this is actually where there was a stain on the original page. So you can see a very faint outline of the stain with really good light and magnification. But essentially you just have white pages now. This was ground zero. These wraps had horrific stains all over them. This is the centerfold where I surmise the can of Coke was spilled. Top, bottom, edges, all stained dramatically. It's just gone now. Dramatically improved from what we started with. As I said, it really wasn't a given that we would be able to remove these stains. I know I had my doubts, and I'm sure plenty of viewers did as well. So I'm over the moon that we developed a process for the interior wraps that effectively cleaned, deacidified the wraps, and we used chemical and photo bleaching to remove the stains to the point of barely being noticeable in perfect light if you know where they used to be. And we retain the amazing page and ink quality. As you recall, this was a hole that we thought the paper was missing. It actually was just double folded over. And look at the paper quality on the cover. It's just straight white. Beautiful. Here's a look at that hole from the back side. Noticeable, but much improved. I really couldn't be more pleased. Very important to me as a conservator, we used only methods and materials that are demonstrated by the scientific literature on paper conservation to be minimally invasive. We specifically used materials and methods that showed no significant degradation in paper integrity relative to controls in peer-reviewed papers. I sincerely appreciate you joining me today for the final episode of this comic book conservation project. I'm really happy with the outcome and proud of the work we did on this one. We preserved a key book for the next century and created a lot of equity for the owner of this comic book at the same time. Most of the materials I use for this project are available from Amazon in the affiliate links in the video description. If you need any of them for your own conservation efforts, I appreciate you using those links. If you enjoyed this video, please take a few seconds to give it a thumbs up, leave me a comment, and please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you want more comic book conservation content, check out our Facebook group, the Comic Book Conservation Community. This weekend, I'm off to Dallas to the Collector Summit. I hope to see some of you there. When I get back, we'll kick off a new project. Until next time, take care of one another.